In this video, I'm going to give you 7 simple methods to get rid of pest snails from your aquarium fast. Everything I'm about to show you are completely natural methods, so you're not going to need any chemicals or that kind of stuff. So method number 1 to get rid of pest snails is to introduce predator fish. There's certain fish out there that will actively hunt pest snails. Ram's horn snails, bladder snails, Malaysian trumpet snails, those are the pests. Now, there's a whole bunch of options with what predator fish you could get. One of the best snail-eating fish is the yo-yo loach, aka Pakistani loach. These guys are going to do a fantastic job with taking out snails in the tank. They're really good with eating snails and minimizing the population. Another great snail-eating fish is the pea puffer. These guys are excellent at hunting snails, just like Pakistani loaches, but they are quite small, so they're mainly going to go after the smaller baby snails. My next tip is to get rid of algae and plant debris that's in your tank. The reason for this is because aquarium snails are natural scavengers, and a significant portion of their diet is going to be plant debris and algae. That's why you tend to see a lot of snails if a tank has melting plants and other organic material. So a good way to prevent snails is simply to remove all the decaying plant matter, all the stuff that's providing the snails with their diet. And with algae, you also want to try to minimize that as much as possible. A common method to remove algae is to keep tons of aquarium plants in the tank. If you rely on pest snails as algae eaters, which can help with the algae problems, the population is going to grow very rapidly. If you want to use snails to remove algae in the tank, I would recommend getting something like nerite snails or mystery snails, as those are typically not considered pests. Speaking of algae, I want to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by AKQA. One of the most common areas where algae grows is the glass, and it's really important that you keep this part of the tank algae free. Our sponsor recently sent this really cool algae scraper, which is super useful for removing algae on the glass. What makes this even more unique is that it also includes a blade that you can attach to better clean algae. I really like this algae scraper because of how simple it is to use. You can easily use this to remove all the algae that's on your glass. You can also choose the size of the algae scraper that you want to buy. What's also useful is that if you ever detach the two parts, the one inside is going to float to the top. If you're looking for equipment such as filters, lighting, or fish tanks, this is a perfect place to shop for high quality aquarium products. They offer a large catalog of different supplies, so make sure you click the link to the shop to check out the products. Now back to the video. My third method to get rid of pest snails in your aquarium is to use bait. What I mean by that is, you can use something like a piece of cucumber or zucchini in there. What's going to happen is all the snails in the tank are going to sense that there's food and get themselves on the piece of cucumber or zucchini. That's going to be able to catch a ton of snails in there, and after they group together, you could simply remove the food and the snails that are on it. If you can't get the zucchini to sink underwater, you could either boil it or you could attach it to a fork and drop it down that way. This is a great method to get rid of snails fast. It'll probably take a few hours for all the snails to get on the piece of cucumber, but if you could do that a few times, you're going to remove a whole bunch of snails. Method number 4 to get rid of snails is to prevent excess food in the tank. Whenever there's excess food in your aquarium, the snails that you do have are going to be able to get a lot more food, and with more food comes more breeding, and so more snails. So the amount of food that is left over in your tank is going to heavily contribute to the snail population. The more leftover food that finds their way into the tank, the more food source there is for the snails. Overfeeding is obviously the most common cause of this. It also happens if you have something like a hang-on back filter and then the food gets pushed down the water by that. Whenever that happens, the snails are eventually going to sense that there's an abundance of food in the tank, which is going to cause them to breed more. You might also want to consider feeding less algae wafers or any food that sinks to the bottom, because first of all, it's a lot of food, even though it might not look like it. Also, whenever the food's being in the water, it's going to dissolve and the stuff just kind of goes all over the place. Method number 5 to get rid of snails in your tank is to remove snail eggs. This might sound a bit odd, but it does work. What you want to do is you want to identify the cluster of eggs that the snail has laid, which you could then easily remove by using a razor blade or sometimes just using your hands. Now, this method is not going to work for live bearing snails, so for example, Malaysian trumpet snails. For others like bladder snails, ram's horn snails, you can easily remove the egg sacs, and it's actually really easy to tell what their eggs look like. They kind of look like this clear sac with tiny dots inside, and they're typically found on the glass or on the surface of a plant or hardscape. You can easily take the eggs out that way. Method number 6 is to manually remove snails. You can manually pick them up, or you could also use tweezers. A small hack I'm going to give is to remove them either in the early morning when you turn the lights on, or you could do it at night by turning the lights on after it's been out. The reason why we do this is because pest snails are typically most active at night. When the lights are off, that's when they normally go out and scavenge for food. Early in the morning after the lights are just turned on is a great time to take them out, as well as by turning the lights on at night. If you can get the snails that you could easily remove, you'll slowly but surely get rid of a lot of them over time. Another reason why this works is you remove a lot of the adults. By doing so, you're going to hinder the amount of breeding. So it's definitely not a useless method. It might be slow at first, but it does help get rid of a lot of snails just by picking them out, and this is especially useful if you do it right after the lights are out. Method number 7 to remove snails is to use snail traps. Now there's loads of different snail traps you could purchase online, but personally I like to make my own DIY traps, and what I would do is I would cut the top part of a plastic bottle and place it back in the opposite direction. I've seen other people do it by just putting a plastic bottle in without a cap so that the snails could go in. There's definitely a lot of ways to go with snail traps, but the main idea here is to lure the snails in by some sort of bait. It could be a piece of algae wafer or fruit or whatever food. Something like a cucumber is likely going to work better as it's not going to dissolve in the water as fast. But once the snails are in, it's going to be very hard for them to get out. And this is a great method. You could save a ton of money this way if you can make your own traps. And the trap could be reused over and over again to get the snails out. Before I end this video, I want to give you guys a quick bonus tip, which is to use predator snails. I know I've already talked about predator fish, which could be really useful. What I'm referring to by predator snails is the assassin snail. These guys are known for preying on other snails. Assassin snails are carnivorous, which is different from other snails, which usually eat plant and decaying matter and the stuff that you feed them. But these guys are going to go after other snails, and typically they're going to go after snails that are smaller than them. Basically, how they consume other snails is they identify the prey, and once they locate a target, they're going to extend their proboscis, which is a tube-like mouth part, and it's going to latch onto the prey snail's shell, and they're ultimately going to destroy their victim and just consume their prey. That's probably why they're called assassin snails. These are really good in keeping pest snail populations down. You could get probably 3 or 4 for a smaller tank, and they're a great method to control the snail population. You won't have to worry about them going after other shrimp or fish. Yeah, they basically just attack other snails. The only downside to this method would be if you don't want any snails at all, but if you just want the majority of pest snails removed, this would be a great choice to consider. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. If there's any other method you found to be good at getting rid of snails, let me know in the comments. Make sure to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.